All right. So there's one person missing right now, but Nick Morrison, thank you so much for joining me on LinkedIn Live.
Thanks, Alan. It's good to see you.
Appreciate being here, my friend. So we are going to talk today. Hopefully, Teresa Marzoff is able to join us. We'll put her in the stream the minute she gets here, but she was having some technical difficulties, so we'll solve that. This might. Yep, I think we're good. Teresa.
Yeah, hi. I'm just going to do it on my phone.
That'll work. We are live right now, so welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, thanks.
It's good to have you both here. So I wanted to start first and foremost. We're going to be talking about counteroffers and all the things that go into counteroffers from an employee perspective, from an employer perspective. But I appreciate the two of you. I know you guys are going to add so much value and so much interesting content to this conversation. So thank you both for being here. But let me first start with introductions. Teresa, not to throw you because I know you were challenged with technical difficulties. So we were going to start with you, but I'll give you a moment to breathe. So Nick, you are the founder of Potiri. Tell us a little bit about your company. Tell us a little bit about why you feel counteroffers might be in the wheelhouse of conversation for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started Potiri really with the understanding and the belief that people ought to have work that's meaningful, enjoyable, and impactful really for their lives. And so we started a business with that, and we found a nice coincidence that that's where companies get the greatest amount of stability, profitability, and quickest run to accomplish their mission. And so we're just playing full out with that. We've got kind of holistic solutions that lead to every stage of the life cycle of the employee. And we're just trying to figure out this thing called work, right? And for it to really work for everybody, both employees, employers, and everybody that participates. So counteroffers, they are seemingly always prevalent. Ever since I've been doing this work for about 10 years now, like counteroffers are always in the conversation. But they're especially in the conversation this year as we see just a rampant number of people quitting their jobs, leaving for other companies, and there being ample opportunity. And we've got inflation that's really high. That's causing wages to increase, and most current employers don't kind of keep up with wages. And so we just think that we're going to see more and more of this over the next 6 to 12 months. So I'm really glad we're talking about it today.
Excellent. And Teresa, you run an organization. You're the founder of an organization called Culture Engineered, which I know the whole premise, or at least part of the premise, is to get feedback from employees. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about your organization and how counteroffers play into what you talk about on a day-to-day.
Yeah, thanks for having and inviting me on, Alan. And so Culture Engineered, we started in 2017. And what it is today, because like most of us, it changes over time as the workplaces change and their needs change. But really, it's about finding individual and experiences that lead to high performing results. And that differs for every workplace. So I'm really excited to talk about this today because counteroffers, how you enter an organization, is such a big part of that. I know I'm a terrible HR person, although that is my background, and I equate, the offer and interaction that happens leading into that type of relationship to dating all the time. And so, how those counter offers have changed over time, and how today those really serve as an opportunity to have a dialogue about maybe one of the most uncomfortable but most valuable parts of the experience. As it goes for both the employer and employee. I'm really excited to talk about that today and how that translates, how that successful conversation or interaction can translate to different results for the entire duration of the employee experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again for being here. Quick introduction on me. I just posted on LinkedIn that I've been in the recruiting and staffing industry for more than 2 decades, which does date me, but so does my gray beard and my bald head. So, I'm not really hiding anything from anyone. But I remember when I first started in this industry, I started for another company in the technology recruiting space. And one of the first trainings, I want to say it was probably within 3 weeks of me starting, was on why to advise candidates to never accept a counteroffer. And we had it plastered all over the office. It was like, you had tear sheets, you had emails, you had conversation, you had trainings all the time on why a candidate should never accept a counteroffer. So I think it's interesting because it is as present today as I've ever seen it. I mean, I've never seen a scenario where, or an economy, I guess. And I've been through, 2002 when I first started my company, 1999 during .com, 2007 through 2009 when the first recession happened, and now today. And it's unlike anything I've ever seen. So again, thank you both for being here to talk about this, incredibly timely and important topic. And I love the messages that we're getting. Janet and Jim, thank you both very much for being here. And you both have a lot of expertise in this area. So I'd love for you guys to join the conversation and throw some questions at us or comments, because I know it's going to be helpful. So the prevailing opinion, like we were talking about, is that one should never accept a counteroffer. So I want to kind of start there, because I think, like we were talking about, like we've all mentioned, this is one of the most difficult economies I've ever seen. So I'm curious. Well, first of all, you guys both run your own companies. In your opinion, would you envision, or have you ever extended a counteroffer yourself to any of your employees who are looking to leave?
Nick, I'll defer to you first.
Oh man, I was hoping you go first. So I've never given a counteroffer, and I can't imagine myself being in a position where I would give a counteroffer.
What about yourself, Teresa?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember, and I'm thinking with independent contractors, I definitely have given a counteroffer. And yeah, I at least 2 times there's been a counteroffer.
Okay. And how did that work? I mean, did those relationships work out? Are those people still with you? Like, what was the outcome of those?
Yeah, one is, and then one, the project, and the one who's not, the project ended, and then one continues to, we continue to interact and work together on an independent contractor relationship. And I mean, I think they're positive. So how it worked, it was one was like I said, a project, and just my budget for it. I definitely had some expectations. What I appreciated about the person when I came back with the counter is then we talked about the scope of work. So again, a little bit different from an independent contractor situation, but I came back with a counteroffer, and we negotiated the scope of work to match that budgeted amount. So for me, it was a great expectation setting. I'm chatty anyway, and I love getting to know people through discussion. So for me, I feel like anytime someone is open to having a discussion, it really allows me an opportunity to understand their perspective more than just that assumption on both sides. So for me, I really appreciate counteroffers. I've been on both sides of those. Not always do I feel like I was happy about counteroffers I received as a candidate, or as a business owner. Those are counteroffers too. But I would say if that delta has been very off, that's usually an indicator that this is not a good, we don't have equal ideas of the value that I bring or the person brings.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a huge point. And I think what you said there about the communication. So I want to talk a little bit about how one even arrives at the point where a counteroffer is being extended, because Nick, you said something very telling, that you would never see yourself in a position to where you would need to extend a counteroffer to an internal employee. And I think that probably, I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing that means that you, like Teresa, like to over communicate. You like to get to know your people. You like to know what their hot buttons are and make sure you're delivering on those things, so that there's no surprise if they come to you and say, I'm resigning, and therefore a counteroffer is never really in the mix. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And just like we're a stand that everybody in the world gets work that's engaging and meaningful, right? We do it at home as well. And so on all the time, right, we're asking individuals that work with us, what do they really want to do? And what's their experience like working with our company and working with me, right? Working with everybody around. And so we're always having that conversation. On a quarterly basis, we have a really deep dive. And then, just throughout the months and the weeks, we talk about it all the time. So I feel like if somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm looking to leave, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to go to this other company, here's my offer. I would be like, well, it's unfortunate, but I feel like they lied to me. All of those times that we were having conversations where you're saying like, no, everything is good, we're here good, or maybe we're having those conversations and they're like, I'm not very happy, and I wasn't able to do the right things in order to change for it to be an environment for them to be here. And so, yeah, I would hope that, we'll have those conversations all of the time. That way we can resolve it one way or the other prior to getting to that point.
Yeah.
And also I would look at it if they're not comfortable or not able, like they weren't able to come and communicate that they were unhappy and there were reasons that they were looking to leave, then the relationship isn't in the right part, and maybe it really is time in order to part ways because the communication really isn't there.
Something broke.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I've been in the situation. Actually, I've been in the situation where I've had employees come to me and say, I've got an offer. Would you like to counteroffer? And that's awkward. Let me just put it that way. That is definitely awkward. And I have not done it. I number one, I feel as though that kind of puts you in a corner. So I don't like that approach, and I would have recommended otherwise. These are great people, by the way. I mean, they're people that I would have hired, or I did hire for my company. So that that in and of itself means I really appreciated and valued who they were as individuals. It's just there's a better approach. There's a different way to go about probably doing that sort of thing. But I've never been in a position where I've actually extended a counteroffer to somebody to try to keep them. I did have one person resign because they were moving, and I said, you don't have to resign because you're moving. You can work from there, and I would love for you to work from there. So please don't leave as a result of that. Wasn't really a counteroffer. That was more of a no. You don't need to quit. We can work this out. So yeah, I was just curious about that first and foremost. So, I think the problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the problem when you arrive at the position of a counteroffer is something is not right with the communication. Like something is broken in the communication, either to your point, Teresa, scope of work, definition of role, responsibility, budget, those sorts of things could be at play. Or to your point, Nick, it could just be the person really isn't excited or happy to be there. And unfortunately, they're not telling you the truth because there's probably some sort of trust issue. There's probably some sort of issue standing in the way where they're like, I can't tell him because he's my boss, which, we all deal with all the time. As much as I know you guys well enough to know anyone can come to talk to you about anything, we face that issue. We are the bosses, we own the companies, and people don't want to be honest with us. Oftentimes, many times they do, but oftentimes there's a fear that we're saying it, but we don't actually believe it, so to speak. So when you think about it from, there's an overwhelming concern, I think, with people who resign, and this came up in some of the LinkedIn posts that we did, where you'll have a target on your back. Like if you resign and then you accept a counteroffer, is my employer going to look at me at that point in time and say, all right, we got to replace that person, even though they're in the chair right now? We're going to have to find a way to replace them because ultimately they're going to end up leaving. In your experiences, either one of you can take this, but I'll turn it over to you first, Teresa, because you're in these environments helping these people re-engineer their culture. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that as a valid concern with the employers that you've worked with, or does it seem like it might be one of those issues that maybe you have in your head but doesn't really materialize?
I've seen both. I would encourage, again, when we're society-wide, we're just very uncomfortable talking about money. So usually when I get the call that I'm upset because, Bob came to me today and, put me in this ultimatum is how it feels. More money or talk. Rarely is that what they say, but that's how it's heard, right? So usually I'll say, oh, okay, how should they have asked for more money? Is that something, like Nick, you pointed out, you guys talk about it a lot, and that's awesome. That is not the case in a lot of places. It's kind of one of those, I don't want to mention more money. You don't want to mention more money. So it never gets said. And when it comes out, it's this extremely awkward, moment. And so one of the first things I will ask, just to kind of confront that, is how is it appropriate to ask for more money in your organization? Because a lot of people, and it's really common that folks feel, and this happens on negotiating initial salaries even, folks don't feel that they can negotiate unless they've got an offer in the backside, right? Like if I have an offer on the table behind, then I have more negotiating power. And that's sadly how we think it has to happen. So going out and getting a new offer that I can then negotiate, this is just someone who's awkward and unfamiliar with how to have those conversations. I don't think that makes them any less of a great worker or a person or wanting to do a great job. It makes them socially awkward in something that we really never teach people, how to ask for more money or approach awkward topics. So I guess from my perspective, I see both. I probably see more distaste, judgment, or now it's skewed. Well, I gave them more money, I'm not seeing any difference. And have to have that conversation. Is it possible maybe they were being underpaid the entire time? Maybe this is actually the value, and we can look at market, what the market bears and all of that. But really, it is a lot of money changes how we see things. It is transactional. We pay for what we think we're buying something, not a person, hopefully, but we're buying a quality of work. And maybe we've paid that all along thinking we were paying a good price when realistically you were getting a bargain all this time. So it really, I think, that's why the conversation is so important, is really getting an understanding of why do you feel it's an appropriate amount of pay and why do you feel that it isn't. That's really what we're coming down to. Because if that conversation doesn't happen and one person just gives and agrees to a counteroffer, it's doomed from the get-go. I don't think that it will survive, and it'll be one of these major statistics we see where they leave within 18 months, I think.
Yeah. Or less. But yeah, there's so much good stuff in what you just said. I mean, I love the part where you said it doesn't make them a bad employee. I mean, that's such a big deal. If they're awkward, or even if they're not socially awkward, they just don't know how to have that kind of critical, crucial conversation, as it's called. I don't know how to ask my boss for more money other than to resign. Mm-hmm. Like, there are people who exist, and that's the only way they know how to ask for more money, is to say, I've got another job. You have to be aware of that. And that's why I think my whole mentality has changed with regards to never accept a counteroffer, because the more you realize how, immature people are in having these conversations. I don't mean that as a slight in any way, but they just haven't had enough of them to know how to have them, or haven't like been coached, or haven't been mentored or taught how to have those really difficult conversations, and therefore just don't know how else to do it. It's like the NFL star who gets, the signing bonus and immediately goes to a check cashing store, because they don't know how to open up a checking account. I've never done it. Therefore, this is what I know. I go to a check cashing store and they take a percentage, and that's how you cash a check. But yeah, back to you, Nick. What are your thoughts on, the target on the back sort of conversation?
Yeah, I think the company, after a counteroffer, the company and the leadership team will definitely figure out how to do that job without that person, or at least they should, right? So what's been signaled is that person is not really committed to the company, right? Is that they're willing to leave, and so it's flashed a lot of vulnerability. Typically, a counteroffer will happen because an employer or a leader will realize, oh my gosh, I can't live without this person, at least in the short term, right? So how am I going to do their job tomorrow, the next day, the day after that? It may take me 6 months to find somebody to replace them, right? And so what the company's going to be doing is trying to figure out how to do that job without them. They may give the counteroffer, accept that person stays, but they're either going to look really closely at how that job is done, or have the people around them look really closely at that, cross-train, so that when that person leaves, because statistically speaking, they're going to leave, right? It could be another 6 months down the road, 12 months, 24 months, but they're going to leave. That way you can replace that position. And so, will they actually let you go after they figure out how to do that position without you, either replace you or have technology or somebody else on the team do it? Maybe or maybe not. What I found is that a lot of people like to avoid confrontation, especially as leaders. So they may not actually let you go, but they may actually let you go when they figure that out and find a replacement. But you'll definitely be looked at as a vulnerable person in a vulnerable position. At least the company will feel vulnerable about that, because they'll think that you're, going to leave at the next best offer, or maybe you come back with another offer or two offers, and all of a sudden they can't afford you for that position anymore because they're paying you too much. So yeah, I definitely believe they will, or at least should, figure out how to do that job without you, without the person.
Yeah. Well, the statistically speaking thing is so interesting to me too, because you see that, at what point do people who resign end up, accepting the counteroffer, and then what time frame do they stay? But statistically speaking, everyone is going to eventually leave your company. That's statistics. Eventually all of the people that you currently have are no longer going to be there, and it's the founder that's still going to be there. That's probably not true, but it's pretty close to true. I think there's certainly enough information out there. I mean, I have one employee right now who's been with me for 14 years, 15 years. Everybody else has turned, and that's not a bad thing. I still have great relationships. I mean, one of my former employees works with you right now, Nick. And we've got a great relationship, but that just happens, it just is. So yeah, that's just I love that we're tracking statistics on people who resign and then decide to stay for a period of time. I wonder how many. There's no tracking on this, I wouldn't ever imagine, and probably no research that's been done. But at the same time that person resigned, I wonder how many other people had it in their head, I'm going to eventually resign, but I'm not going to do what they did and accept the counteroffer. Like at that point in time, other people made the exact same decision and then quit within a period of time, but they never had the target on their back. The only person that did was the one who resigned and accepted the counteroffer. It's kind of an interesting thing. What do you think about the company that extends the counteroffer? Does that make them look weak? Does that make them look like a weak employer that, to all the other employees, do all the other employees look at that manager or leader at that point in time and say, wow, that's all it took for you to, recognize them and give them a promotion, give them a raise, do whatever? Do they suddenly, become less excited about the leadership of the company as a result of a counteroffer, do you think? Going to you first, Nick.
Short answer is yes. So companies, people will look at that and realize that, companies really dependent on people, right? And so they'll realize is like, wow, they can't live without this person, even for a short amount of time. And so, yeah, it's, I'm sure probably the rest of the group is really thankful for that one person that went through the counteroffer conversation. So they're like, great, I get to learn from it, because everybody talks and it's spread and, everybody will figure it out. So I'm sure they're really thankful. They're like, oh, great, I get to learn from it. This person goes through it, and then they'll figure out what they want to do from there. There's a good, gosh, even just in Phoenix, I could name 6 companies off the top of my head that have that reputation, and everybody that works there knows it. That like, hey, the way to get raises and promotions is to, put in your resignation, and then that's how you get it. And so there are a lot of places that get that, but you'll definitely be seen as, not that there's like a power struggle, right? That like there's more power with the employer than the employee, but it'll definitely skew that way. They'll see that people can go ahead and do that. Yeah. So you as an employer, maybe it's worth it, right? Maybe you did really get caught in a very vulnerable position where somebody was willing to leave, and you just can't go, a day, a week, a month without having them. And then you kind of have to do it, but definitely people will know, and it'll be seen as yeah, I don't know if weak is the right word, but like vulnerable for sure, loss of power, and then the willingness to kind of do what, somebody may ask for.
Yeah. So true. Teresa, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, does that weaken the leadership? Does it weaken the company, in your opinion?
I think it has the potential to. Again, so much of it depends on how that conversation is had. 2 people are going to walk away minimum from that conversation, and they'll have very different stories. We're all the hero of our own negotiation. And I think, there's going to be some very different stories on how that happened potentially. But if it's truly an effective conversation, and it's this, and I've had this where I walk in, and I mean, I've had to lay off my boss. And at the same time, the whole company took a pay cut. So I was, in essence, getting paid less money to do two jobs, like a job that my boss never did, right? Never was a boss without me. And so how would I, in that situation, and how would I approach that conversation of, hey, the economy was bad. We all know this is when we had the last true recession. And, how do you approach that? How do you approach that conversation? It's a scary thing. And so, yeah, I think at that point, my company then, had I approached them, they would have definitely felt, yeah, right. Blood's in the water. If we cave to this and people find out, this is not, it's not going to go well for us. We're going to have people kind of making this approach and passes at trying to get more money. And potentially that's true, but it was because we were underpaid. It wasn't because, it's a jockeying. Maybe there are some people that do that, but we probably know who they are. Most of my career has been aligned to sales folks. The good sales folks know who can negotiate some better numbers, because it's number. They know their performance. It's standard. They know, hey, I'm not in a position to negotiate. I'm not even covering. There's some salespeople in my career who haven't even covered their overhead. Like, they know they can't negotiate, and others do know they can negotiate. Now, if we're having a fair negotiation but what does that mean for the company? Does it make sense to turn them over? There is a point when someone will get to a pay, work their way to an experience or skill level where some companies can't afford them. And we need to make sure that those conversations are happening so that the appropriate people are exiting our organizations. And instead, it's not this, silence that's killing us. So yes, I think it has the potential of looking weak to some folks, but those are not folks that really come to have a negotiation. They're coming to lay out demands and call your bluff. Those folks that are going to move your business forward. The true negotiators, here's why I feel I need to make more money in this role, or am producing more value than I'm getting. That's a real conversation. And I don't feel that it's worth losing those folks to tailor to these, kind of high demand, slow production, low value folks.
Right.
I don't want them to run any business that I'm a part of.
Yeah, it's more of a threat than it is a negotiation at that point. You're almost, what is it? The United States does not negotiate with terrorists, kind of deal. We're not gonna negotiate with you if you're, at that stage of the game. You just let that person go and say no. There's no counteroffer, and maybe that reestablishes yourself as a stronger company. And we did get one comment. I know both Teresa and Nick, you guys see it as well, but I didn't want to plaster that one up there. So we can just let that person know that we see their comment. So true, happens at my company all the time. The only reason I didn't put it up there is because I don't want your company to see that you made that comment, basically. So I'm going to spare you that.
Fair.
But most comments, you guys comment away, and I'll put them up there. We appreciate everyone being here, and any questions or comments you have, please go ahead and share them with us, and we'll put that up there. I think there's a great comment from Janet. I think in almost all cases, everyone is replaceable. Very, very true statement. Almost. That's the key word, almost, because there certainly are those individuals that I would say are key employees that, at least if you're in an organization that has backups, or has individuals have been cross-trained or things like that, certainly there's the case that could be made that you can lose a majority of the individuals safely, but there certainly will be times where it's going to cause a lot of anxiety or possibly bring you to your knees if you lose specific people. So don't put yourself in that situation. um, from again, from a company perspective, you had mentioned, Nick, that you've worked with, you could probably rattle off 6 or 7 companies that you work with right now who have this sort of environment where people have to quit in order to get an increase in money. Would you say those organizations have a lot of disloyal employees as a result of that? Is that just the style of that company, as far as, like we were talking about earlier, it's not just the employee that's immature in how to negotiate an increase, but it's the employer who sounds like they're also very immature in how to communicate with their employees on how to ask for raises? Is that a disloyal environment? Is that an environment that, those organizations don't even recognize everyone could leave at any point in time, legit? And, if they don't get a raise, they're gone, sort of thing?
Yeah, just as a distinction, we don't work with them. that is not a workplace that we want to support or be a part of. But we just know about them as we're talking to people that have come from other companies, if we're doing trainings or recruiting and leaving, and people know it, and so they'll even tell us, as well as we get towards the end of a recruiting process and about to make an offer. Right, people will tell us, they're like, yeah, I know I'm going to get a counter offer. Everybody in my company does, and that's really the way to get promotions and raises. And we'll hear people say it, and they declare it. They're like, and we're like, they've never experienced it, they've never done it themselves, but they've seen 6 people in front of them do that. And so, does it create an environment of people that are disloyal? Maybe. I don't think it creates an environment of trust. What it does is, so you have to threaten to leave in order to get anything. So there's no real care from the company in order to serve the needs of the individual, right? Because they don't really care. Like, here's the offer, here's what we're going to do for you, good luck. And we're not going to give you anything else until you come and threaten to leave. So they're not having those conversations on an ongoing basis. They're not asking those people, hey, are you happy working here? Would you like something else? Is there anything missing? What's the environment we can create for you, or what can we do for you in order to make your life easier, make you more effective, and make your experience here better? They're not having those conversations. The only times they have them are to see the offer, whatever else whatever other offer they've gotten, and then just match it plus 3%. Yeah. That's really it. And so it definitely breeds a lack of trust. Absolutely.
Perfect. We'll get to Tamara's question next, but Teresa, what would you say about that as far as disloyalty? I mean, do you see it in your work where offering the counter offers and having them accepted creates an environment of disloyalty in your experience?
I think it becomes a habit. Hopefully, if you realize, oh my gosh, this person who I think is a stellar performer feels that they're undervalued or underpaid or both, hopefully that serves as a kind of a red flag, right? Where you're asking more questions like, is it possible that this happened with a really, really beloved local company? And I was talking with their comp person, and they had a huge disparity in pay and between men and women, and realized it was primarily because most of the men, they were hiring from out of state. So there's relocation, there's different negotiations, and over time, most of the women had been promoted internally. And we all know that's not so much a gender issue as it is people that are promoted internally tend to make less than people hired from outside of the organization, especially if they're paid to relocate here. That happens all the time. So fortunately, it caused them, when they started hearing this, prompted them to ask better questions, look into this. So I think when you have an employee that you feel is really valuable and you realize you almost lost them and you weren't even aware that they felt this way, you should be looking to understand, is this a widespread issue? Is this a bigger issue? Asking those questions proactively. For the companies that don't and just think, we're just going to wait until we hear from folks one up and negotiate our way through it, absolutely it breeds disloyalty, because you're not loyal. You're not loyal to performance. You're not loyal to stellar performers. You're loyal to protecting and nickel and diming your way through it. If you really can't afford it, then you have that, like the company that I did, where they said, we are in the red. We would love to give you more money. We do not have it to give you. And I knew, like, that is a fair conversation. And
Yep.
so I think disloyalty comes when the conversations start becoming transactional, when it does become demands. Because right now, don't want to deviate too much from this, but when we're talking about equity, or when we're talking about negotiating and counter offers and talking about more money, there's no way that you're not talking about equity discussions. And we know that women and minorities tend to be paid less. And so if there's not a way for them to have that conversation in your organization on, I feel that I'm being underpaid, whether it's compared to my counterparts, that is never going to go away. It's
Yeah.
going to one off every new person that comes into your organization. Hopefully, it's going to help you get more money. But other than that, you can't have those conversations without first saying, I feel that I should have more money. And most people will feel that they need a counter offer because we can't afford to not have a backup plan.
Right. No, so true. I want to throw Tamara's question back up here. So what is the best way to have that conversation? And so I'll take this one first, because this is actually the next topic that we were going to talk about, is from an employee perspective. You know, how does it look for you? What are some things that you should be doing or looking for? And again, I think it's key. There was another post that I saw on LinkedIn earlier today about talking to friends, you know, having a coach, having somebody walk you through the role play, the conversation that you need to have with your boss. And I had the very fortunate event a couple weeks ago of having lunch with a very good friend of mine who's in an environment right now. He's at this level. He doesn't want to go to this level. He actually wants to go to this level. So he's interviewing for jobs down here rather than going to his boss and saying, look, boss, I don't want to do this job anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not happy being a leader. I'm happy being an individual contributor. Pay me less, but just give me a different role within the same organization. I'm like, dude, you got to have that conversation. Like, that is a conversation your boss wants to have. And that's a conversation that I think the whole organization is going to look at and go, wow, this guy didn't want to move up. He wanted to move down. They talked to him about it. He decided to stay. I mean, how much greater is that culture? How much greater is that environment that he can then go to his team and say, look, guys, I decided not to leave. I decided to stay, but I'm going to be one of you now. That to me is like so critical to have that kind of conversation. And it really, just to answer your question, Tamara, I think it comes down to role playing. I think it comes down to talking to friends or coaches or people in the industry if you're not comfortable doing it yourself. But you have to understand, if it's only about money, you certainly have to have done your research. You have to know what's available out there. And that doesn't mean an offer from another company. That just means, you know, what are colleagues making? What are jobs being posted for? What is it saying with regards to, you know, salary.com or payscale.com, which, you know, maybe sometimes not the greatest information, but sometimes close. Do your research. And if it's about the money, have the conversation about what it is you feel you do that warrants that higher income versus where you are today. And don't make it like, you know, Teresa and Nick were talking about earlier, don't make it a hostage negotiation. You can't do that. You know, that's the wrong way to go about it. And don't say, I'm going to look for other jobs unless. So it's got to be a very amicable, very approachable, very open door sort of conversation. But at the end of the day, I think it's role playing. I think it's talking to friends and colleagues. I think it's having the conversation beyond in your own head. Because when you only do it in your head, ultimately it doesn't go the way that you think it's going to go. Typically, it goes worse in your head than it does in reality. Typically, you're more afraid of it in your head than you need to be, or than it ends up being in reality. But I'll leave it there. What are your guys' thoughts on Tamara's question? So what's the best way to have that conversation? Teresa, you go.
Go first, Teresa. Yeah.
I definitely think, I think owning awkwardness. Hopefully there's a good enough rapport. So if I'm going to you, Alan, and I want more money, which I do, if you have extra, I'm open to taking that. So just so you know, but if I am uncomfortable with the scenario, I should just say that, like, hey, Alan, I've really got something on that I want to talk with you about, and it's awkward for me. I know it's going to be awkward for you, but I'm not really sure how to have the conversation, but it's really important. And go into it. I think just owning and acknowledging the awkwardness, it does amazing things. A lot of our work is around feedback, and the best way to just address it is head on. It's uncomfortable, and you're not going to like it. Guess what? I don't like it either, but it really needs to happen. And say so, and then open it up. I don't know if you'd like to schedule it at a different time or if you'd prefer to have it now, but I've really been doing a lot of thinking about this, and I'd really appreciate it if we can just sit down for like 20 minutes and talk through some ideas I have, and come with ideas. Say I need more money and have an idea. And I will caution folks, I think we look at money as what we will tolerate sometimes, and I think that this is where this conversation of counteroffers gets confusing. You know, the pay is the number one reason that people leave a job. It's the number 3 reason people take a new job. It doesn't match. And so I think that when everything else fails, we fall back to, and I'm not even making enough money. So I think, you know, if you're not happy about other things beyond just the money, really take a moment of self-awareness and reflect. If they give you this, are you going to be happy? Is it true about the money, or is there other things? So I know I'm saying a lot there, but I think on the person's part, on the employee's part, they should really give some thought to, is it truly the money, or are there some other things that I think would help, like my life balance? Maybe I want to work from home. Maybe I want these things. These are really important to have, and don't just have a superficial conversation and then blame the employer later that you're not happy because they met demands that you didn't, or they failed to meet demands that you never even brought. And
Right.
then you're having and approaching that conversation with your boss, own and acknowledge the awkwardness of it, and ask how you know, they would prefer to have that conversation, and stress that you've been doing a lot of thinking about it and you feel it's really important, and you're sorry that it's uncomfortable, but again, it's really, really an important thing that, you know, they sit down. I think everyone wants, you don't want to have the awkward conversation or give up any other money, but at the end of the day, you know, to have that conversation first before you go out and start negotiating, you know, backdoor deals to get your way out of it. I think that shows trust. No one wants to be treated like the enemy when you're also asking them to cough up more cash.
Right.
Start with that. I trust you. I want to have this conversation. I want to look for a way for me to stay here and feel like I can provide for my family or whatever the need is. Are you open to having that conversation with me?
Yeah.
And from there.
No, I think Jim's comment was great. He said Teresa's mindset is spot on. How do we make it easier to ask for a raise? It shouldn't be hard, but the asker has to understand that the labor market is generally inefficient. Are you underpaid, or are you failing to show your value? The real adult question is, do I think I'm worth more than I really am? A question for the employee and their life coach, I guess. Yeah, that was great. Great points, Teresa. Thank you.
I'll say one other thing. I'm sorry, I should have said this, and I did this for myself all the time. Ask about bonus opportunity. Like, I was always willing. If they can't do it flat, whatever, that's fine. But as an HR person, it's extremely rare. No one typically, especially in like general or management level, is earning a bonus or some type of performance incentive. If I can reduce attrition, if I can do that, or I can bring down our benefits rates, or whatever your role is there, is this something at the end of the year, would I be eligible for a 20% bonus? Is that something that you would be willing to discuss? And that gets you there. I always appreciated that, because I don't want you to feel like you handed something. I earned that money. Yeah. If I wanted more money, it's because I already do it. So then having that fair conversation, and I think that now there's some skin in the game. Yes, my background's with salespeople. Yes, shouldn't be using this term, but we're both in it. I'm getting you what you need, and I have to bust my butt in order to make that happen. So usually companies are a little more comfortable with that approach rather than flat salary increase.
Yeah.
So
I think that brings up an interesting point as well. I think you guys both know my friend Anthony Garone, but Anthony, he wrote a book called "Clueless at the Work," and part of Anthony's presentation is always about, do you know how your job produces revenue for the company? Because you were hired for some reason to produce revenue for the company, whether you're a help desk person, a C#.NET developer, a CIO, a salesperson, whatever your role is, your role impacts revenue. So to what you were saying, Teresa, skin in the game, obviously, all three of us know what that is from a sales perspective. But no matter what your role is, you are generating revenue in some way, shape, or form for the company. So if you tie your bonus or your ask, so to speak, to how you can help increase the revenue of the company, whether it's closing more help desk tickets or developing more software, moving quicker, whatever, how does that help me make more money? And that, from a leadership perspective, would be looked at very favorably too. If I do these things and show these metrics, can I get a bonus? Nick, what were you? I interrupted your comment.
No, you're good. So how to have the conversation in advance. I take this play from the playbook of one of my best friends. His name is Matt. And so Matt is kind of in mid-level management of a big fancy company. And so what Matt does every year on the 1st of January, so on the 1st of January every year, he'll go to his boss. He sets up a meeting, like an hour and a half, sets up a meeting with his boss, and he lays out the things that he wants to accomplish that year. And it's different every year. So some years it's a raise, some years it's a promotion, maybe it's both. Sometimes it's getting into a different department, right? And so let his boss know, hey, here's what I want to do this year. Here's what I want to accomplish. And then he asks the key question: what do I need to do in order to accomplish that or to get that? And then they dialogue about it. And so his boss will let him know, well, hey, here are the things that you need to accomplish in order to get those. Here's what you need to get done. Here's who you need to be, acting. And just lets him know. And Matt says, okay, great. Thank you so much. I'll do exactly that. I'll see you on December 31st. And he exits that meeting. He'll put it in an email. He'll put it in writing, send it to his boss, and then say, hey, is this what we agreed to? And now you've got an agreement. And so he's like, great, my whole year is set. I just go out the rest of the year. I do the things that I said that I was going to do. And at the end of the year, I know when all of the executives come around and they're like, who's been working really hard and who's doing the great things? They're always like, Matt's doing amazing. He did all of these things this year. It's great, which normally happens in October, November. By the way, they don't wait till the end of the year. And he gets that. And it's insane the amount of his accuracy rate and getting raises and promotions and moving things around is great. But the key question, which is what Teresa brought up, is be willing to go to work on it. Understand, just don't give them an ultimatum, hey, you have to do this for me, but willing to put skin in the game, willing to do something to work towards and have a real partnership with a company you're working with is amazing. So that's what I say, be like Matt.
I love that. Yeah, I think the putting it in an email is such a key thing. I'm so glad you brought that up, Nick, because I think people miss that when they have a conversation with their boss or even vice versa. This is what we outlined. This is what we talked about. Do you agree? Does this cover everything, or did I miss anything? Such a huge thing. And you're the feedback queen, Teresa. So, I mean, that's got to be something that I would think, that you probably talk about as well, just to make sure that, everything is outlined pretty well. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, again, the second thing that happens most often after awkward conversations is there's two beliefs that a conversation happened. I think we said one thing, you think we said another, but I think it's great. And that's a great example, Nick, I think, because imagine Matt thought, you know what, I'm going to go bust my butt and do things this year. And then next year, I'm going to come and we're going to have a discussion. And all the while, you don't see what you don't see. You're just thinking, man, Matt's doing a great job, but Matt's doing a great job at this pay level. Maybe they had no intention ever, they never even consciously equated a value to that type of work until he sat down and said, what do you need in order to make this work, which is an improv technique. And I love, how do we get to a yes? And so what do you need to see in order to make this value? And those are, I know from an HR perspective or a sales perspective, it is easy, those numbers. Hey, if I bring down your attrition by 2%, that's a ton of money. If I do that for you, do you think, this 20% bonus, does that make it a little bit easier? Knowing that you're not paying, $500,000 in turnover costs, does that help? Okay, great. Sounds awesome. And now we're both on that same level. But if you do it after the fact, it creates resentment on both parts. Both. Right. The employer and the person are now resentful because you were doing all this. It's that Sheryl Sandberg, I think, calls it like the tiara syndrome. Like, I'm just going to do a great job and expect that someone's just going to pick me out. Like, I'm amazing. That's not how we see people. That's just not what we do.
Right.
So I think that I agree. Be like Matt sounds like an awesome motto and take away from this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. That's our motto for this entire conversation. # be like Matt.
Yeah.
I like it. Matt didn't even know it was going to highlight our conversation today. It's a beautiful thing. Any parting words from either of you with regards to counteroffers? We covered a lot of ground. We had a lot of good comments. We appreciate everybody being here. But Teresa, we'll start with you. When it comes to counteroffers, what would you like to leave people with other than be like Matt?
Yeah. Again, I know I said it before, but the quality of that conversation, it's just like a complaint. We get kind of wrapped up into the awkwardness and discomfort of it and miss some really cool opportunities for discussion in those because we're awkward and we're fumbling around these awkward topics, So I think leaning into awkwardness, I can't encourage it enough. Just giving folks a break. This isn't something that we've educated. And I don't think I've ever been to an orientation that says, if you feel you're being underpaid, here's how you should have that discussion with your boss. Like, we've never discussed it. And then we shame employees when they try and do it. And I think a lot of times we read awkwardness as aggression or entitlement, when really it's just awkward. It's an awkward conversation. So leaning into that, and then remembering that the equity issue that's happening in our society today, all the time, cannot improve. We cannot move past that unless we start getting really comfortable with these conversations. And sometimes that's going to be a counter offer. And I think that, we're just a sum of our experiences. So if that is what someone came and said, well, I want, I feel like I should have more money. And maybe someone's boss said to them before, well, does anyone else? No one else thinks that no one else is willing to do that. Then they thought, oh, I won't let this happen again. I'm going to go get myself a counteroffer so I can show them, see, like, other people think that this is a good value, and now we're ticked off. So again, I think, just having the conversation, leaning into the awkwardness, and remembering that the goal is to make sure that we're paying fairly, no matter who's on the opposite side of that performance, is really what we're looking for.
Yep. Great comments. Nick, what about you?
Yeah, it's really good. Communication, just be open to communicating. Let the people that you're interacting with know what you're really looking for, what's most important to you, and what you're getting after. And that's all to say, like, hopefully by doing that, you get to avoid the counteroffer conversation, that you just don't even get to that point. And what I find most times in all of the research that we've done and talking with people love feedback. They want to know how they're doing, right? And leaders of companies want to know what the people on their teams really want, right? What are they looking for? What are their wants and desires? I can say as a leader, it's so much easier. Like, I sleep a lot more comfortably at night knowing what the people on my team want and need, at least as much as they're willing to tell me, right? but I love it. I'm like, I know what you want and need. And for some people, it is money. For different sorts of reasons and circumstances, right? Mainly short term, but for some people it is money. So I know, great, right? If we have anything extra, maybe I can send as bonus or anything. For some people on my team, it's time off. They love time off because they've got family that they want to go enjoy. They've got travel, some other things. And so I try and find scenarios where they can have more time off. But it's just so much easier knowing that like that's what they really want. That's what's most meaningful and important to them. And so that way, hopefully we can hit that on a daily basis. I know we're not perfect, but like hit it ongoing such that we just have less and less counter offer conversations and less people like threatening to leave and then kind of disconnect. So what I would say is like, just don't be afraid to kind of share what your wants and desires are with the company that you work with, the people that you work around. Be willing to go to work for it. Like Teresa was talking about earlier, put some skin in the game and be willing to kind of go do it, but just communicate with the people around you. Let them know what you really want. We've had, and sorry, I'll end with a couple of stories. We've actually had, through the process of our recruiting, a couple of candidates accept counteroffers in the last, we'll call it like a month or 6 weeks. And both times the employer was like, they didn't even tell me that's what they wanted. Or like, I would have given it to them beforehand. Like, well, they could have had it, or like, gosh, I was giving them more money when they really wanted more time off, or I was giving them all of this time off and flexibility when really they wanted more money. And so just, don't be afraid, like communicate, let people know what you like, what's going well, what's not going well, and try and do it as professional of a way as possible, but communicate.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's critical. And thank you, Tamara, for that. Thank you, Nick and Teresa, for the great conversation. But yeah, I think what Teresa said with regards to, expose the fact that nobody likes having these conversations. I think that's such a critical thing. You're not comfortable. Nobody really loves to interview people. Everybody's a little bit uncomfortable in the interview, and you're certainly a little bit uncomfortable when you're negotiating salary. It's not fun for either party. Trust me. I've been doing it for 21 years. It's not fun. It gets easier the more times you do it, but that doesn't mean that it's fun. So that part, and then, to Nick's point, communicate. It's just find out what's really at the heart of the issue, find out what your people are really motivated by and for. And I think that's going to save a lot of counteroffer conversations from even happening, which ultimately would be a great thing, because I think it's just a great thing. If we're not counteroffering, people are maneuvering and moving the way they should, and not running into roadblocks that might slow them down or give them pause or reason to have targets or feel that they have targets on their back. Janet, thank you so much for being here as well. And Nick, Teresa, thank you both again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan. This is a great conversation. Appreciate you setting it up. Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, great chatting with you, Nick. Thank you so much, Alan. Thanks for everyone who tuned in.
Most definitely.